Wisconsin is 7th in the Big Ten media poll. Rajeev and I are going to tell you if we agree or disagree with that. Plus, which team is too high? Today's Locked On Badgers. Let's go.
You are Locked On Badgers, your daily podcast on the Wisconsin Badgers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is going on, Badger fans? Welcome to Locked On Badgers, your team every single day. Thank you so much for tuning in, for being a part of this community. I'm your host, Ryan Harings, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create the account, and use code LOCKEDON for $20 off your first purchase. You will not regret it. I am joined by the ever optimistic Rajeev over there. We're going to start here. Listen, Big Ten Media Days are here. I don't think anything earth-shattering happened, but it is another sign that football is approaching. We are almost there. Fall camp is about to start. This close. I released Big Ten media poll. I want to put the poll up here, and I'm going to ask Rajeev. We'll start with this. Is the Wisconsin ranking in this fair? They have Wisconsin at number 7.
I mean, of course, I'm the eternal optimist. No, it's not even close. 7th, get out of here. What is that crap? No, it's actually not that bad. I do think we're a little bit low, specifically with, USC and Iowa ahead of us. That, to me, is that discussion point. I'm not arguing with the top, right? I mean, Ohio State, Oregon, that's obviously, that's fine. Michigan, Penn State, you can argue, see how Penn State goes. But I think Wisconsin, it's not unfair to be 7th, but I think looking at teams like Iowa and USC and the struggles that one had offensively and one had defensively, improvements were made, but I think Wisconsin deserves to be at least one slot higher, maybe potentially 2.
I think it's fair. I mean, I hear you on that for sure. And USC, we're going to talk a little bit about one team that we think should be a little lower, one team that should be a little higher. Again, the poll is scrolling along on the bottom. I think 7 is super fair for Wisconsin, though. That's a 7-win team last year. And if you're on the outside looking in, right, I think internally, and I think it's justified in some ways. I really don't think it's just fan speak or fan hype. I think internally there's reasons for optimism that we get. But on the outside, if you're telling me that's a 7-win team, much harder schedule, and you're bringing in Tyler Van Dyke to save the ship, I mean, if I'm again on the outside looking in, if I'm a Michigan State beat writer, a Maryland beat writer, I'm going to be like, I don't know. That doesn't seem like the answer to all of today's remedies or all the days, the maladies, whatever it is. I think 7 is super fair for Wisconsin. Again, this is a 7-win team last year. Tyler Van Dyke has never proven he's a franchise guy. That seems right to me. But let me give you a team, and I think you and I agree on this. I think USC is too high. Just like Wisconsin was a 7-win regular season team last year, so was USC. And you're not going to fix that defense, which was atrocious overnight, just by hiring a new guy. And I talked about this. I had Justin on the show. I think what people aren't talking about with the UCLA defensive coordinator hire, had a great year at UCLA last year. Great. They've made strides in trying to fix their defense. His defense last year didn't play Oregon, didn't play Washington. He's been a DC for 1 year. Like, let's slow the hype train on this guy fixes everything that's wrong at USC. So I think I would drop USC a couple spots.
Yeah, I mean, they averaged 34.4 points a game allowed, which is ridiculously high. 6.2 yards per play they allowed. And yeah, Lynn certainly brings a little bit better than what they had before, but they also lost some players too, and they brought in some transfers, but we don't really know what that's going to look like. And the one thing you can always say about USC is Lincoln Riley's going to have the offense, right? There's no doubt about that. Now, they did lose Caleb Williams. They did lose their leading rusher. They lost 2 of their top wide receivers. They brought in some transfers, and Miller Moss looks like he's going to be a pretty good quarterback for them. But 5th is a little bit high. I'm also going to say Iowa. And that's just because I don't like Iowa. So let's just get that out of the way. But that offense is atrocious. Now, I know they got rid of Ferentz. And I know that Cade McNamara is supposedly healthy, but that offense has really never proven to be able to do anything. And to me, I look at it just in Iowa, Wisconsin, like just those 2 teams, because let's be honest, the game we play against Iowa is probably going to decide who edges up in the standings. And I just feel like going into this year, I have much more confidence about beating Iowa than I have in years past, because our defense also got better. And yes, their offense may have improved, but our defense improved. We had way more speed on that side of the ball. And to be honest, I can't imagine Phil Longo's offense once again not being able to score points against Iowa. They also lost Cooper DeJean. That's a huge loss defensively for them. And they have some returning players, but I just feel like Iowa and USC both to me are like really 5 and 6. Again, not unfair. I'm not saying it's a horrible poll, but I do think that USC especially, and then Iowa, you could also look at maybe being a bit too high.
Yeah, I think both those are fair. I'll let you start with this one. I started with the team I think should drop a little bit. Give me one team on this poll that you look at, you're like, that team should be higher.
Northwestern is 17th, and I know that Northwestern is not a great team, but come on, man. They came out of nowhere last year. David Braun did an amazing job with that team. Amazing job. This is just, to me, a little disrespectful to be 17th and behind teams like Indiana and Illinois and Maryland. I don't see it. I think Northwestern is a team that's going to surprise people just like they do every single year they play football. I feel like this team never finishes in the very, very bottom basement of the Big Ten. They always make some strides and scare some teams. This, to me, seems like they should be in the 12 range, not 17th.
Yeah, it's interesting. We didn't compare these lists. That's a team I highlighted. Now, when you say Northwestern never finishes, Pat Fitzgerald had that 1-11 season. That kind of, but you're right. Like typically, it's very rare for them to be at the bottom of the Big Ten.
Like bottom, right?
Yeah, because why? Because they recruit smart players. They understand what they're trying to do. They're going to be well coached. David Braun last year came in a ridiculously tough spot. Everybody thought they would. Like, are they going to win a game this year? Like he turned that thing around. And by the way, the whole they're playing in this weirdo stadium while there's this game. I think that plays in Northwestern's advantage. Like it's always weird to play there. Like it's never like a daunting home field advantage. People are making that out to be something that's going to be difficult for them. It just feels like it's just going to be more of the same. We're going to play in some rinky-dinky stadium that's going to have grass that's too tall, and they're going to win 5 of those games at home. Like them being 17th, I think is ridiculous. I'm right. Yeah,
honestly, I think you just take Minnesota and Northwestern and flip them. Okay, because Minnesota's always just too high. Let's be honest, it's not unfair for them to be where they 13th, but yeah, I think Northwestern finishes ahead of Minnesota. To me, that's that. And Minnesota's got a difficult schedule too. There's a lot to break down when you look at the schedules and you see what some of these teams have. And that is really a thing that if you look at the nuance of it, you have to look at the schedules of these teams because, you're talking about 18 teams playing 9 games. That is a very tight margin. Like the difference between 4th and 9th is going to be 1 or 2 games, right? So you really got to look at the schedules. And that's why specifically I think USC is where it was a little bit too high. They've got to go to Michigan. They've got to play us. They've got some tough games. It's not incredibly tough, but they do have 5 road games in the conference. I just don't think they're going to finish that high. And conversely, Northwestern not going to finish that low.
I agree. I also don't think Purdue is the worst team in the Big Ten. They have a solid quarterback play. That also feels a little too low to me. But
so let me ask you this though: who is? Because I thought about that too, and I was like, okay, I would have probably put Purdue at the bottom too. But who would you put at the bottom if it's not Purdue?
I feel like Indiana is a really obvious choice. Like brand new coach coming in, and you're not coming. I understand he is coming in with bravado through the roof. Like the guy's like a Navy SEAL skyrocketing out of a C-130. Like that's his presence, but he's a brand new coach and he's coming into a place that has no tradition. I know there's a lot of transfer activity they pulled in, but the cupboards are bare. It's Indiana, brand new coach, brand new system, all the growing pains we saw last year, and the cupboards are going to be far more bare. I think it's Indiana is probably is what I would say is the worst team in the Big Ten right now. I think Minnesota is overranked, just like you said. I think the shine is coming off PJ Fleck. It may be one of those teams. It's difficult. I wouldn't have Purdue at the bottom, but I could see the argument for putting them there, I guess. It's you're right, though, and I haven't really thought about this. There is going to be a couple tiers in the Big Ten this year. You have that top tier, you have this big middle tier, and then I think you have a big bottom tier, and all those tiers are going to be really close.
Yeah. 9 games in the conference play, obviously, and it's just like 18 teams. That is really razor thin. Like someone's going to be 7-2 and finish at the top. Someone's going to be 6-3 middle. 5-4 is going to be maybe 9th. It's just, you don't know. Who knows what this, and look, when you're having a conference like this, the SEC has done this for years. They beat each other up. I feel like this conference does it as well. And this year more than ever, you're going to see so many teams get that 1, 2, 3 loss. They're going to lose a team against a team they don't think they should lose against. They're going to beat a team they shouldn't beat. And it's really going to make the margin for error really low. So when we talk about a Wisconsin record and how we feel like they're going to finish, I have them kind of in the 6-3 range in conference. Well, that very easily can be 4-5. You just, it's really hard. And those margins are so razor thin, especially in the new look conference.
Let me ask you this. And we didn't mean to spend so much time on this first segment, but I think it's great. Is the top tier just 2 teams or is it 4 teams? Because I think it's Ohio State, Oregon. I think that's the top tier. And I don't think Penn State and Michigan, which are in a tier above, but they're better teams than we are. They have a better collection of talent than we do. But I don't think they play with Oregon and Ohio State this year.
Agreed. I think that when you're looking at, a tier above us, certainly there's a couple, but Ohio State and Oregon, the class of the conference. And I think that's going to be a heck of a battle. They play this year. That's going to be a fun game. That's really going to be the decide the conference. It's those two teams. Michigan's certainly going to take a bit of a dip. Penn State just not really good enough to hit that Oregon, Ohio State tier. Neither are teams like us or USC. So I feel like it's really clear at the top, and then it's kind of everybody else. Michigan and Penn State, you're right. They're a tier above. Hopefully Penn State, we can eclipse them this year. It's one of my big storylines. We've got to beat that team this year. But I agree with you on the tiers.
All right, we're going to take a break there, come back. We're going to talk about going through every position, offense and defense, and which players in each spot, which positional battles at each spot are most intriguing and exciting to us as fall camp comes up. I'm really excited about this one. But first, we're going to take a quick break for our friends of the show over at Game Time. Game Time remains your number one source for all your ticket buying needs. Whatever you want to do, wherever you want to go, entertainment-wise. You want to go to Camp Randall to watch Wisconsin Penn State, like three hombres, myself, Rajeev, and Justin are going to do. If you want to do that, go get your tickets over at Game Time. You get panoramic views of the seats, so you're not just – this has been done for a while, right? You get a picture of the seat, but now they do panoramic views over on Game Time, so you can look to your left, look to your right, see where the closest bathroom is, the closest place to buy beer is in Camp Randall now. You can do all of that over at Game Time. Best inventory, most tickets, any type of entertainment venue you want to go to. Fast, easy, simple. Game Time is incredible. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets over at Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your purchase. Terms do apply. You can create an account, redeem code LOCKEDONCollege. That's LOCKEDO on college for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. All right, let's jump into positional battles. We're going to start with quarterback. And Rajeev, why don't you get this one off? What's the most exciting part of the quarterback battle for you?
So it's down the depth chart a little bit for me, and I think you're looking at obviously I think 1 and 2 are pretty much set. Even after today at Media Day, Luke Fickell made some comments. Look, it's LaCrue's job. LaCrue. It's Tyler Van Dyke's job. LaCrue and Mabry are sort of my sort of battle. I think that's going to be interesting to see because LaCrue's got a lot of talent, and obviously Mabry's kind of like that guy that everyone's talking about, right? I mean, he's this, like, he just looks like he's going to be a great quarterback, but LaCrue can do things that other people can't. I mean, the way he throws the ball on the run, the cannon that he has, like, it's not, his attributes are really understated sometimes. So I think LaCrue, Mabry in that third battle for who's really going to be the future potentially of this program after Tyler Van Dyke and after Braden Locke, or even potentially supplanting Braden Locke. Who's that next guy? And I think the 3-4 is where my tough battle lies.
Yeah, I'm right there with you. That's the one I highlighted as well, because I think we all kind of know how 1 and 2 is going to shake out. Now, it's not written in stone. If it changes, that would be incredible. I just don't think Locke is overtaking Van Dyke. I think we want to. You hit on something I think is important. Cole LaCrue, what he kind of brings to the table from an athletic standpoint, from a throwing standpoint, it is understated. And there's this thought that LaCrue was a crisp guy, and he was, but he was also a Longo guy. This staff came in, they reevaluated everyone on the board, they went and watched him throw, and they said, yes, we still want you in this. Like, they had a chance to say yes or no, and they still wanted LaCrue in this system under Longo because he throws on the run, because he has a good arm, because he has good size, and he has a ton of moxie. But you shipped it over to Mabry, right? We all saw the physical tools. We all saw the growth. 1 interception as a senior at the highest level of Texas football. I can't wait to see that battle. And honestly, if Mabry takes that number 3 spot, that could be a springboard into next year, and it's going to be a Mabry Locke battle, right? That's the springboard for him.
Absolutely. And you also wonder, like, does that spell a potential transfer of the other guy at some point, right? I mean, because these guys aren't going to stay there forever and not play. So, yeah, I think that's really interesting. And I think that LaCrue, the thing about LaCrue, like you mentioned before on other shows, the intangibles, right? His effort and his willingness to try to be able to galvanize a team and win at all costs, and the way his attitude that he plays with, that moxie, you're right. That absolutely can take you from 4-3 and 3-2. When the margins of talent aren't really that wide. That's the kind of thing that's the difference maker. The more hunger you have, the more you want it. So yeah, I want to see Cole LaCrue do well. Obviously, we were both excited when he came on with us, and of course we are with Mabry too. But that's that battle. All right, it's who can be that next guy, because we've got the guys at the top. Who's next? Yep,
let's go running back. I'll lead this one off. You're probably in the same spot I am. I want to see who the running back 3 is. We know who the top 2 are. I am so excited to see who RB number 3 is. And I said it on the show just the other day, like, freshman I'm most excited to see in camp. It's Dilon. It's Jones. I cannot wait to see this dude. I think there's a very good chance, and we talked about this before, there's a couple spots where if you're a freshman, you can come in and play. If you're physically ready, right? Running back, receiver, corner, kicker, right? But there's a couple you can come in and play right away. Running back's one of those spots, and this dude's different. It's no disrespect to Cade Yakimelli. It's no disrespect to Jackson Aker. Those guys weren't 4-star running backs for a reason. Like Dilon Jones is one of the top prep running backs in the country. I think he brings all the requisite size and ability to the spot. I can't wait to see him battle for that area.
I do have the same thing written down, but I do want to also highlight the fact that you can also discuss the Malusi Walker situation. I am high on Malusi. I think you are too. Justin is not as high on Malusi because he always likes to bring up his yards per carry, which is a fair point. And he thinks Walker is going to kind of supplant Malusi at the top of the depth chart, and not necessarily right away. I think we all agree that Malusi starts, but so the evolution of that, I think, obviously in camp, you're right. It's the freshman, but I think looking at the season, how long will Malusi be one? Can he be one all year? Can he have an amazing year, or will Walker kind of show out and be the guy? And then will we have the freshman come up? So I think there is some discussion at the top of the depth chart too, but certainly in camp, which freshman, which one of these guys. And obviously Atuka's been there for a lot longer, right? So he's had a much bigger, more chance to kind of get in with this team. So there's that element as well.
And Darian Dupree is another guy in that mix, the other big-time freshman running back. You know, the interesting thing with me with Ches and Tywee, it almost feels like to me, it feels like they're going to have different roles, and it's going to be a 1A, 1B. I don't think it's a 1-2, right? I think it's a 1A, 1B. And you're going to use Walker in some spots because he's bigger, he's more physical. You're going to use Ches in some spots because he's quite frankly probably a better out of the backfield catching the ball. He's probably a little better in pass protection. He's had more experience in the system. I think they're going to be very similar, but they're going to be used in very different roles.
Yeah, they're both having a lot of impact on this team this year, no doubt about it.
Let's go. I have tight end next. We'll let you take that one.
Well, I mean, I think McGowan and Ashcraft it's going to be who can really be that guy at the top. I mean, Ashcraft had a good freshman season. He showed some things. He showed a lot of good attributes, but he also played like a freshman, and McGowan has experience. And I feel like a lot of people are excited about his receiving ability, and from a pass catching athleticism and dynamism, I think that's McGowan. But then again, you know, you've got other pieces of the tight end room. And so I feel like, how high is McGowan? Is he TE1 right now? Is it Ashcraft? And who's really going to be that guy? Because in year 2 of Longo's offense, I think the tight end is going to play a bigger role. We didn't really have the talent there last year. This year we have more. So I expect the tight end position to play a much bigger role in what we're doing with Phil Longo.
Yeah, I do too. For me, this one's almost like a giant question mark. I wrote down in my notes, I just want to see who flashes towards the top, whether that is McGowan, whether that's Tucker Ashcraft taking a jump, whether that's a guy like Grant Steck being able to take a leap and become like a guy into that 2 deep that they're relying on. This position feels very up in the flux. Obviously, Riley Nowakowski as well. I just want to see, as fall camp goes on, who are the top 2 guys getting reps? Who's getting reps out of the tight end spot on 3rd and 9, right? Is that Tucker Ashcraft because they want another pass protector in there? Or is it McGowan? Is he stepped into that role? I think this position is kind of wide open because nobody did enough last year to really anchor themselves into a spot where everyone else is fighting for the number 2 spot, the number 3 spot, right? So I'm very excited just to see halfway through fall camp, who's getting the 1 reps, who's getting the 2 reps, who's the 3. It's going to be exciting. And listen, Rob Booker as well. Like maybe he takes a leap in some areas. I think it's a year away for him, but I don't know. I'm excited to see who steps up midway through fall camp, who is getting the bulk of those reps.
That's going to be, it's going to be a position we really need. And I hope one of those guys, I hope to see, I mean, obviously that competition's there. And so I hope it brings out a lot of, sort of hard work from all these guys. Cause if someone shows out, they're going to be the guy.
So my pessimistic view on this one is I think this room's still a year away. I think that's where this room is still at. I like the young talent. I don't think it's quite there yet. But
better than last year though.
For sure.
Would you agree?
Yeah. Yes, for sure. Just because Ashcraft's a year better. Like Ashcraft's going to be a year better. And you're bringing in Steck, you're bringing in Magana. So definitely better than last year. I think in 2 years, Longo maybe is at the point where he's really in the Swiss Army knife with his tight ends, which he wants to do. Let's go receiver. To me, it's when we go 3 or 4 wide, we know Pauling's going to play. I think Bryson Green is definitely going to be one of those dudes. I think Tretch is going to work his way into that mix. Who is that other boundary receiver that's playing opposite of Bryson? And honestly, like, would it shock you if it was Vinny Anthony? Would it shock you if maybe Burrows was that guy? Would it shock you if it was Griffin? Would it shock you if CJ Williams took a step up? Like, one of those dudes has to step up and become a consistent option in this offense to play opposite of Bryson, to play opposite of Pauling. That's one of my, out of all these battles we're going to talk about, that's one of my ones I'm most excited to see. Which of those guys is going to step up on the outside?
I mean, obviously, I actually circled it as the #1 battle of camp because, I mean, it's CJ Williams and Vinny Anthony. Those are, Vinny Anthony, that to me, that's 1-2 right now in that position. But let's not forget about Terrell Henry, right? We brought in a guy, and you're right about Burrows. I mean, Burrows is a guy that people looks like, okay, he's probably going to back up Green. But, I mean, you're absolutely right. There are a lot of guys, and that, iron sharpens iron. That's going to create competition, and you're going to see someone have to step out of their shell and do it. CJ Williams on paper to me seems like the guy that's going to do it. I really like CJ Williams. I like the talent that he has. Didn't exactly show it in a bunch of times last year. So I think and Vinny Anthony apparently has made really big strides. There's a lot of, positivity about him in the spring. And so, yeah. And then you got the other guys. This is by far to me the top battle of fall camp, because we're going to know very early on who's getting those reps. Like you talked about tight end, someone is going to be getting those reps, because it's not time to just give everyone equal share. It's time to get ready to play football. And you're going to see very quickly who those guys are and who builds a relationship with Tyler Van Dyke, right? I mean, that's going to be a really key thing too. I mean, this is a guy that can throw the ball down the field, can really stretch things. So these boundary receivers are going to play a big role this year. Obviously, the slot guys are always going to be huge, but someone is going to take a big leap, and hopefully someone took a big leap in the offseason and really steps up. But that competition should really breed a really solid out boundary receiver.
I like that we're so on the same page with this. I'm right there with you. Yep. It's like my most exciting battle to watch. Two things I want to point out here. I don't think they got Joseph Griffin to sit around, right? They brought in a portal. He's kind of a late addition. I kind of wonder if they looked at what they had and said, we need to bring someone else in. The interesting thing to me with Griffin is 2 years ago, you're looking at a guy that had 18 catches. 5 of those were touchdowns. Like, that's a really interesting ratio a couple years ago. The other thing I'll point out is, you mentioned it, Tyler Van Dyke. It's a great point you brought up. Who best complements him? Well, it's the deep vertical guys. Who is that? It's Vinny Anthony, maybe Quincy Burrows. Like, it's not really CJ Williams as much, right? He was a little slower, maybe a little more like Bryson Green. If you want to be a little more flexible and versatile on offense, you're probably looking for a guy that can stretch the seam, get deep past the safety, threaten that 2-3 deep. So to me, that seems like a Vinny Anthony or a Quincy Burrows. I don't know.
Yeah, that's a fair point. No, that's a really fair point. I mean, I'm thinking, I kind of thought about it as who I thought was the best one, but you're right. Like, you do need that guy that can really stretch the field. And I think Quincy Burrows could be one of those guys that's primed for a jump. He is so talented. And there was many times we saw last year, like, man, he made such big plays at key times. He's just that guy that you're like, wow, he could be really, really something. And I mean, he could end up being the best boundary receiver we have this year. Who knows? Any of these guys can, if they take a step up. And so, yeah, I'm really excited to see all these guys play.
Same. All right, let's take a quick break. We're going to come back, offensive line, and then get to all the defensive spots, biggest battles in our opinions at each one. Really excited to get this going. But first, a quick break for our friends of the show. Also, a quick second to say thank you so much for tuning in. Thank you so much for supporting the show. As always, really do appreciate it. All right, let's go. I think I started receiver. Let's go offensive line. And obviously, news just came out, unfortunately. Leighton Nelson. Sorry, the name. I always get Peyton Lane and Leighton Nelson mixed up. Obviously, 2 transfers, similar names, both in the trenches. Season-ending. It sounds like a season-ending injury based on what Luke Fickell said at Media Days today. He was talking to the camp, that podcast there. I want to give credit where credit's due. That's a massive blow to the depth. They got him to be that swing tackle. They got him to be that guy who could play on either side. That being said, what is your biggest kind of depth chart battle here coming into fall camp with the offensive line?
You mentioned earlier with tight ends, you kind of put a question mark because there's so many different players. And I think that's kind of how I am for this. To me, it's all the freshmen. I mean, I think Kevin Haywood looks like he's working his way up into being the 2 deep guy on the left side, left tackle. But then you got a lot of young guys out there. You've got Corey, you've got Cubberly, and then you've got Mandel. There's just so many players that we don't really know where they're going to fit. We don't really know who's going to be backing up center. If it's going to be Kadonko, I mean, are one of the freshmen going to be the guy to do it? And so for me, I just want to see who's that number 2 line. The number 1 line is clear. That's easy enough, but it's the 2 line. How many freshmen are in there? who are the freshmen and where are they playing? Those are all kind of question marks. We don't really know much about it. And offensive line is one of those positions where, as a freshman, oftentimes you don't see these guys really come in and make an impact in their freshman year. But we're going to need that because we don't have a ton of depth. And so which freshman does kind of stand out? And I'm more so focused on where they're playing. Who's going to back up center? Where's Corey playing? Where's Mandel playing? And that's really going to be the battle for me. It's not necessarily who, but it's where.
Yeah, that's well said. I put the tackles because I think Lane was one of those guys. Or Peyton Nelson was one of the Nelson. Oh my gosh, Nelson,
late Nelson.
Dude, I'm gonna get those guys mixed up. I already have like created an amalgam of their names together. But I think he was your swing tackle, right? I think that's what he was brought in to do because they generally don't want a guy like Kevin Haywood, as talented as he is, being the number 2 tackle in his true freshman season. That's scary with the schedule we have. I'm really curious to see who the tackles are, who the backup tackles are. Can Barrett Nelson kind of maybe step into one of those roles, or is it Kevin Haywood? Do we start the season with a true freshman as the backup tackle, and is he the swing tackle at both spots? That seems sketchy too, right? If a tackle goes down, do they try to slide Huber out, and then maybe I just want to see who the backup tackles are because we saw last year in certain games, poor tackle play leads to losses on the road. And it's really easy to lose a tackle to injury in the Big Ten. So that's where I'm looking at. But I love your point with the freshman. I am also very curious to see where Corey is, where Mandel is. I think that's a great point.
Well, the other thing is, we talked about the strength of this unit, and we've both said that this is one of our top units in the whole team. So, but yet at the same time, there's a lot of question marks in the depth. Now, obviously, with Nelson's injury, that adds a lot more question marks to it. But this unit, it could get scary very easily. If we have a couple guys go down quickly, we've talked about how important Jake Renfro is to this team this year. And God forbid anything happens to that guy. But that instantly is where depth comes in. And then all of a sudden, O-line goes from potentially the strongest unit on the team to where does it fall then, right? So there's so many question marks. And that's why establishing that depth, using fall camp to figure out who these guys are and get them reps in their positions is going to be very telling as to how good the guys in the 2 line can really be.
Yeah, I think it's pretty fair to say this is probably one of the best starting units on the team and one of the the most unproven depth units on the team.
The question mark depth. Yeah, absolutely.
Yes. It's quite the contrast. I think if nobody gets hurt, not like it's going to be great, but that's not going to happen probably again. And that's where it's a weird juxtaposition there. All right, let's get into defensive line. For me, it's kind of the backup interior spots. I really, obviously, you have Curtis Neal there. Where does Jamel Howard fit in? Where does Dilon Johnson, like the freshman that we're all been pretty hyped on, where does he fit in? Where does maybe Ernest Willer fit in? That interior of the defensive line has to be better. It's been talked about a lot. We got gashed on the run way too often last year. I'm really interested to see where Peyton Lane fits in. Like, where do these new pieces fit in on the interior of the defensive line, and can they push for the 2 deep, or can they even challenge Curtis Neal for a starting spot potentially? That's what I want to see.
Yeah, I wrote down. It's funny how you got Lane's name right. Good job, by the way.
I know.
I wrote down one name here, and it's Jamel Howard, because I've been waiting to see Jamel Howard when he came to Wisconsin. We were pumped. We talked about on a show specifically about how much like size and talent, and we had just lost Keanu Benton, and it was like, who is going to fill this role? And yeah, I just want to see where he is. I want to see what he's doing. I want to see how many reps he's getting, where he's fitting in exactly. Jamel Howard is, to me, like the storyline for just outside of the course, the starters is, where is Jamel Howard and how soon is he really going to be suiting up and playing on the field? Because on paper, he could be a great talent for us. And he brings athleticism and size that we don't really have, but we haven't seen him yet. And he hasn't really done that. So I'm really interested to see specifically him. Where is he and how good is he going to really be this year?
And he's a big win. Like we talked about, this is a guy that Miami wanted, several other players wanted. This is a big time defensive tackle win, but not everybody pans out, right? And I would say this, college football, the timelines on all these players has accelerated, right? Because of the portal, because of NIL, because of player movement. It's going to start to raise some eyebrows, right? If Jamel Howard doesn't make a move this year, it's going to start to raise that, because this is not a deep defensive line. If you're a highly recruited prep defensive tackle with that type of size, right? It's not like a guy you brought in at 260 and he's struggling to put on weight. If he doesn't make a move this year, Rajeev, he doesn't get into that too deep, I think it's fair to start wondering. The book's not, the book will be written, but it'd be fair to start wondering.
No doubt about it. I mean, he is. We need to start seeing his name get called for sure.
All right, let's go linebacker. Your linebacker battle.
I mean, there's a lot of good ones here. This is one of those fun ones where there's so many people. I mean, you look at the starters and you figure, okay, that looks to be set. Peterson and Pice on the outside, Chaney and Allegro on the inside. But then the inside is really because Raheem Thomas is quite the talent. So I am really interested in the starting line themselves. I don't know that while we think we have a good idea. I mean, Jake Chaney went to media days. I think he's a starter. But other than that, honestly, Ryan, I feel like the starting linebackers could be different every week. And I feel like that's how deep I think that unit is. And then, who's playing where. And also just, we have freshmen out there. We have Heiberger. And what can he do? We have Lafayette. There's so many guys that you're thinking, okay, can they reach the 2 deep? I think Leon Lowry's going to have a big year. So I think he's going to challenge for Peterson's spot personally. And I think he's going to end up in Peterson's spot and Pice on the other side. So I think the 1 and 2 lines here are very intriguing all across the board, outside and inside. And one of these guys is going to really step out. I think Raheem Thomas could be starting soon. I think Leon Lowry could be starting. Allegro could end up being the best linebacker on the team. I mean, there's so many, I call them good question marks. They're not bad question marks. These are like exciting question marks. We don't know because we feel like there's so many good players. Tackett Curtis, haven't even mentioned Tackett Curtis yet, that we don't really even know who's going to be great. We know we think some people are going to be great. So it's not like the O-line where we're like, ooh, we don't know what we have back there. Here it's like we've got a lot. Who's going to be 1, who's going to be 2, and who could potentially work their way in, because there is a lot of talent in that room.
Yeah, I think we could do a show on just this group. Like literally just this group, how the depth chart is going to shake out. So I had 2 thoughts. I couldn't even narrow it down to one. The first one is I'm really excited to see who's in on pass rushing situations. Like, and this is even further complicated by the fact that this is no longer, the football we grew up with where you're a 4-3 or you're a 3-4. Who are your 4 linemen? Like, there's going to be a 3-3-5. There's going to be a 2-4-5. There's going to be some situations where they have 1 defensive lineman and 2 outside linebackers with their hands in the dirt and a couple linebackers behind them. It makes it difficult to say. But I'm really curious on 3rd and 13. Who are the 2 main outside? Is it Pice and Lowry? Is Peterson in there? And who's on the inside there, right? Is it Allegro and Raheem Thomas? Or when Tackett's healthy, is it Tackett? Or I tell you, the other guy I wrote down, I just mentioned, is Christian Allegro. At the end of last year, every single person I talked to, everybody on the show said that dude is a bona fide straight-up starter next year. He looks great. By all accounts, he's had a great offseason. He's athletic and versatile. He's kind of got lost in the shuffle, though, because we brought in 5 transfer linebackers and 2 stud prep linebackers. I think he could be a monster, and nobody's really talking about him. So it's him, and then I want to see who's lining up in pass rushing situations.
Remember how excited we were when we saw the athleticism that all of a sudden Allegro brought to the position? We're like, oh, look, that's what we've been waiting for from John Meta all year. And Jordan Turner, that's what we've been waiting to see, is someone who can chase a guy down to the sidelines and make a play and be disruptive. And you're right. I mean, there was a time where he wasn't even people weren't even writing his name down as a top linebacker. I'm like, the guy had an amazing freshman season. At the end of it, yeah, he could have a huge jump. That's what's exciting, though. Any one of these guys, we've literally mentioned 8, 9 guys right here. Any one of them could be the star of the defense this year. And some of them, we may never hear their name because they couldn't make it. They didn't find their way into that 2 deep. So there's so many names. And yeah, it's which one is going to be where. And you're right about Allegro, man. That guy, just what an end of the year. And we were so happy with someone who, hey, he can actually run to the sidelines. Really nice.
It felt like, oh, look, that's a real life linebacker, right? After the entire year, it's like, oh, that's what it's supposed to look like. Oh, that's awesome. I will caution Badger fans for this. They won't all work out, right? And we kind of did this a little bit with the receiver last year. I think there's similarities. I think there's differences, right? I don't think it's a 1-for-1 comparison from the receiver hype last year to the linebacker hype this year. Some of these guys, just be prepared, Badger fans. Like, a couple of them probably aren't going to play as much as they wanted. They're going to end up transferring, and it's going to break people's hearts, because it feels like we're high on all of these guys right now, and it just won't all work out perfectly. But yes, I'm right there with you. It's the position I'm most excited to see. Let's go cornerback. For me, it's kind of who the number 3 boundary guy. Like, so you have Rico, you have Forkerin. I'm excited for that next battle, right? Is it the Clona? Is it Xavier Lucas? Is it Agard? Is it a guy like Laufey? I'm kind of really interested to see where Xavier Lucas starts, and by the end of fall camp, where maybe he starts to get to. That's my guy I'm really excited to see. I want to see where he kind of ends up in this mix.
I wrote down 2 names, DeCluna, Lucas. That's the battle. to me, because DeClona, I feel like we talked about Delancey obviously is going to be another guy that's going to play a lot. And I feel like after that, it kind of like, okay, where is it? You're absolutely right. And is DeClona going to take his spot and be like, yep, I'm CB2. So this is my spot. Or is all of a sudden Lucas just in there and all of a sudden we're like, oh my gosh, this freshman is incredible. Can he challenge for four current spot? You never know. And we obviously, you've talked about how on our last show we did together, after this year, we're going to need that depth big time. We're going to need Xavier Lucas to be someone that's there because we're losing a lot in the secondary next year. So yeah, DeClona Lucas for sure. That to me is like just which guy is it and where can Lucas fit in? You're totally right. This guy, it looks incredible on paper. I know you're so hyped on him and I can't wait to see where he is.
He's one of my plant the flag in the earth. I'm going to ride or die with this dude. I think he's going to be a stud. It's partially because the measurables are just there and not, I think if you were like a Florida State fan, a Miami fan, a Clemson fan, an Ohio State fan, schools that constantly get 6'1", 200-pound guys who run a 4.38. We just don't get those dudes very often, especially from places that also teach technique. So it's just a rare find for us, right? And I'm just excited to see how it could pan out. Let's go safety. What's your safety battle here?
This is the one line for me. I feel like this is Latu Zachman. I think that's where we don't, I mean, look, they're both going to play, but I want to see if one of them is better than the other and one of them steps out. We saw last year that Latu had a lot of tackling issues. We weren't really pleased with his play at the beginning of the season. I thought Zachman had a good season overall and really covered that position well. And I feel like Zachman could absolutely take that starting role over Latu, and we might see Latu slowly kind of fall down the depth chart, potentially, maybe not really past 2, maybe 3. But I think that Zachman Latu right at the top, who's going to be in that safety position.
Where do you put Austin Brown in this? Do you have him as a slot corner? Because I know he's kind of bounced.
I think of him as just like a nickel. I mean, I feel like I feel like he's that nickel back. Oftentimes when I think about this defense, I think 2-4-5, and I just put Austin Brown as a starter as that third cornerback. Okay,
that's fair. Yeah, I think he's going to bounce a little bit, but yeah, he's definitely played in some of that nickel spot. To me, I also wrote down, I put Brown in there as well because I think this staff is going to move people around and it makes it a little tough to do like straight black and white projections. But yeah, it's Latu Zachman. Honestly, 2 years ago, Latu played better, right? Last year, he was kind of, let's just call it, he was kind of a disaster. Like he was unplayable for points of the season last year. But if you get 2 years ago version of Kamoi Latu, he feels a little rangier than Zachman, probably a tick more athletic. Might make sense to pair that guy with Wohler, who's, listen, Wohler can do everything. But conversely, I kind of feel like Zachman gets slept on. I think he gets the label of typical Wisconsin white safety, right? And I think he's more athletic than that. I think he's a little better than that.
I mean, I've talked about Zachman a lot. I love him. I just think that, he does get slept on. He is undervalued for the team, which I think he's going to end up being a starter. I think he's going to be a huge player for us this year. And he brings effort, and his heart is unquestioned. I feel like the way he plays, this sort of the moxie that we've talked about with other players, the way he plays with that. I mean, he really stepped in and played well when Latu wasn't playing well, and we needed Zachman. If we didn't have Zachman, we would have been in real trouble last year in a lot of those games where all of a sudden our defense kind of turned it on in the second half. Well, he played a big part in that along with everybody else. But there were many times where I thought, okay, Zachman is a guy where I think he's going to take a step. I really feel like he might. I mean, you're not going to see a huge step from a guy that's a senior, but I just think there's a little bit of growth there, and I think he's going to surprise people this year.
Well, and I'll also end with this one as we kind of wrap this up. You can't miss tackles as a safety. Like, you just can't miss tackles as a safety. We saw it way too often with Kamoi Latu. So it doesn't matter if you're rangier, a little longer, maybe a little more physical. And he is more physical. Like I talked to Brady Collins about it. He is more physical. It doesn't matter if you miss 25% of your tackles. I think that's the number, right?
Yep, it was 25, and Zachman missed 9. So, I mean, that's a big difference.
Yeah, that's it right there. All right, we're going to wrap it up there. As always, appreciate Rajeev jumping in over at the Bucky Report at Rajeev Badgers. Go give them a follow for sure. Anything else on depth chart wise, just as we wrap this up? Any other player you're just excited to see in fall camp? Maybe outside of the depth chart, another guy. And if you say, I know you're going to say Amari Snowden. No,
I mean, I was going to say Amari Snowden. Yeah, yes, I always wanted to. I mean, Amari Snowden and Jamel Howard are two people that I just I expect them to be starters for this defense at some point in their career. Both of them. And frankly, Braden Moore too. We didn't talk about Braden Moore. So I feel like, but Snowden and Howard, I was thinking, okay, we got this Keanu Benton replacement. We got this super tall cornerback with skills and physicals that we really haven't seen from that position. These guys could be difference makers, and they haven't been there yet. So I'm all about those two guys, and they're always going to be names that I look at. Every time I'm reading an article about what happened at fall camp, I'm going to be scanning for those two names.
I mean, speaking of, listen, we talked about Xavier Lucas, maybe getting him some reps for next year. Snowden's kind of like, it would be great if they still see that potential future as a corner, if he can get reps this year to build for next season. Emilio Agard, another guy. Justin Turner, another guy, a guy that we haven't really talked about that could probably use some reps as more of a hybrid role. So Jay Harper, like Harper is a really good player. Another guy. I'll give you one that doesn't get talked about at all because he's not going to play this year because he's buried, but I've heard really good things athletically, and he was a guy I really liked when he came into the program. Tyler Jancy, the linebacker out of Illinois. He's an athletic, instinctual kid. I talked to his coach. We were doing film study, and then I've heard good things this offseason. Now he's in a stacked room right now. I don't see it this year, but I would be curious to see if he flashes during fall camp. So maybe in 2 years, a year, something like that, he could stand out.
That's a really good shout. I mean, there's definitely a lot of talent there for the future. No question about it.
Linebacker stacked, man. All right, we're going to wrap it up there. Thank you for tuning in. Go check out Locked On Brewers, Bucks, Packers next. Go get your dose of your favorite teams across the Locked On network. On Wisconsin, he is Rajeev. I'm Ryan. We'll talk later.